announced last year that we had chosen to use PrepScholar as an SAT prep program for my junior. A lot of you had questions for us, questions about how it went, what we thought of the program, and if we thought it was worth the money. So today I'm sitting down and answering your questions and giving you my daughter's answers on her thoughts on the program. Hey guys, welcome back to my Practically Imperfect Life. If you're joining for the first time, welcome to my channel. My name's Abby. I'm a homeschooling mom of 2 high schoolers. And last year, when my daughter was a junior, we knew we were going to have her take the SAT in the spring. And I had talked to her about strategies for preparing for that, whether she thought doing a workbook would be sufficient, if she thought she needed any prep at all, or if she wanted to do some sort of online program. And it was actually her idea to have something that was a little more structured. She thought having an online program would be something that would encourage her to log on, complete lessons, something that was telling her what she needed to study, how often she needed to review. And I started to look through the many different options that are out there. We looked at things like the Princeton Review and Tried and True Tutoring and several others, but we finally decided to use PrepScholar. Now, if you'd like to know details on how PrepScholar works as a program, including things like the cost, I'm going to go ahead and I will link the video where I talked about this. I'll put a card up here and I'll link that video down below in the description box. But today, rather than talking about all of the details of the program, I wanted to give you my daughter's thoughts on how it worked for her and some things that both of us kind of realized we would need to do differently if I was going to use this program again in the future, because I do have another student who will be a junior this year. My son will be a junior, and so next spring we're going to have him take the SAT. So at the end, we'll let you know if we're planning to reuse this program again for him. So really quick overview on how PrepScholar works is that it does have your student take an online assessment initially, really just to get a baseline on where they're at in lots of different topics that could be seen on the SAT. Based off of that, it will come up with a series of lesson suggestions for your student. And it will give recommendations on how often they should be on, but your student gives input every single week on how many hours or how many days they plan to work on their SAT prep. So if they have a busy week and they're only working for 4 or 5 hours, they would input that and it would base the lessons on that. If they have a week where they can put a lot of hours in, again, it will adjust the assignments. And then they go through and they watch different lessons, they learn different strategies, they're doing lots of practice questions, and it keeps track of their different levels of where they're at. Are they, very basic in their knowledge of an area? Have they moved up to advanced knowledge, or have they completely mastered that topic? And it's really all about time management in that regards, because if there's a topic where your student is doing really well and they hit the mastery level very quickly, there's not a lot of point in constantly reviewing that concept. Will they see that concept from time to time and on the practice exams? Yes, but is it something they're going to be looking at multiple times during the week or over the course of several weeks? No, because they've mastered it. If there's something where they're showing good progression on it, like they're showing that they are starting to learn that, but maybe they need some more review and they're kind of working their way up towards advanced or mastery, they will continue to see lessons on that. But if there is a topic where it doesn't matter, your student's done multiple lessons, they've done a lot of problems, they just seem to be very stuck on that subject, rather than spending an extensive amount of time trying to get them beyond that, they're going to focus on improving their ability to answer different kinds of questions, because you can't be a master of everything on the SAT. Well, I mean, you could, but most students are not going to be a master of everything on the SAT. So how do you just use good test-taking strategies to get through those questions while focusing on having correct answers to the things that they know you can get right? So it is very interesting in how they looked at that. And as a parent, I was getting weekly reports. I got an email when she put in how many hours she was going to do and letting me know kind of what she was going to do. I got an email letting me know how she did for the week. How many lessons did she do? What were her scores? I could go in at any point and I could see all of the different topics on both the reading, writing portion of the SAT and the math. I could see where she was at level-wise in all of those. But I did not dictate how much time she needed to spend on this, nor did I dictate, what I wanted her to work on. I really wanted her to take some accountability at this stage. I wanted her to do the work and figure out how she needed to adjust her schedule to give herself adequate study time. I felt like that was an important skill for her to learn. She knew the importance of getting a good score on this test. She knew that there were a couple schools that she was looking at that were going to require her to submit that, especially as a homeschooler. There were going to be some scholarships she was going to apply for that are going to require this. So she knew how important it was. And she also knew that there were all of these tools available through the Prep Scholar program for her to use. So I did not sit there and say, you need to do this many hours a day or this many days a week. I did facilitate some extra time for her, though, by lightening her school workload during different parts of our school year. And that allowed her to spend a portion of our school day working on her SAT prep, as opposed to fitting it in kind of outside the school day. As she got closer and closer to the test time, though, she was utilizing kind of her free time to spend more time preparing for the SAT. The other thing that we both really liked about it is that it was online, which meant she could do it anywhere. We have multiple laptops, so sometimes when the weather was nice, she'd be outside working on it. She would take the computer up to her room. If she was going different places, she might take the laptop with her, and if she had some free time, logged on and did a lesson and did some practice problems. So that really did give her the freedom to be able to do things at different times. The other thing I did is I went ahead and I took a bunch of the questions you guys had. I wrote them down. I had my daughter write her answers out here for you. I would love to have her on here to actually answer these questions herself, but she's not interested at all in being on screen. So we are going to just go ahead and you'll have to hear these answers from me. But this is all her feedback on stuff. So the initial assessment, several had asked how long that was, and she said the initial assessment did take her almost 2 hours to complete. One thing that we learned right off the bat is that there is an SAT portion, and then there was a digital SAT version. Now they may have changed it at this point where there's only the digital SAT, because it used to be that the SAT was all paper and it's transitioning to all digital, and they had two separate prep programs. And she did the paper SAT assessment, and then we realized that that was the wrong one. And we had emailed to see if like those assessment scores could flow over. And they're like, no, there's like a whole different strategy to the digital one. She needs to do it again. So she had to do that initial assessment all over again. But she said it took her about 2 hours. Then some people asked how long were the lessons on average. So again, you kind of go on and you watch different lessons that will highlight different things about different topics. So you're not learning everything from scratch, but you're learning some good basics, some things to help you, like tips to help you remember different things, strategies towards answering those types of questions. She said the majority of the lessons were anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes long. There were a couple though where the videos were closer to 20 or 25 minutes. So when she had more time to spend on a lesson on a given day, she would typically do the longer ones. She also said that the practice exams were a bit longer to complete. So they have, different types of exams you can do. She said that sometimes she'd spend 30 to 40 minutes completing some practice exams. They do also have some full length practice exams that you can do where, you can basically create kind of the exact environment your student is going to have for the SAT and have them practice doing that exam start to finish. How much time does she spend on it each day, each week? So she said at the very beginning, she probably only spent 2 hours a week. And when she told me that, I was like, yeah, what do you think about that? Do you think we should have used our time a bit more wisely? But she said at the start, and that's all the way back last fall, 2 hours a week. And then as she moved closer to the test, at her peak, she was doing about an hour a day of prep, especially in the last couple of weeks before the test. What part was the most helpful for her? She said knowing how the online program worked and learning the SAT strategies and how to approach answering questions was really helpful, especially on the reading and writing section. And I asked her if there was anything that was the least helpful. She said no comment because everything seemed to be helpful. And then I asked her, did you feel adequately prepared for the test? Because after all, we spent this money, you've put all this time into it and everything. Do you feel prepared, or do you feel like you should have done something different? And her feedback was, I felt pretty prepared, but spending longer on the program at the start probably would have been helpful. And so that kind of leads me into a little bit of like my reflection on this, because her score was very, very good. We were extremely pleased with it. No, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but let's just say she was well over in the top 10%. She did excellent. I was extremely pleased with how she did. She did score near perfect in the English, like the reading and writing portion of the SAT. Near perfect. I already knew she was very strong in that area, and I think this just made her even stronger. So very good job there. Math has always been the area that kind of struggled, and I did go through and I was looking back at the different, categories. So, I mean, it breaks it down like trigonometry, geometry, inequalities. Like, it tells you all the different categories of math questions and where they were at, whether they were like at the core level, advanced, or mastery. And very interestingly, the math areas where she was ranking kind of lower were ones that she was covering in her math class last year. And if you have watched my curriculum review videos from last year, you know we had a big struggle with the math program that she used last year, and she was very frustrated with it. And so we definitely saw her struggles with that show up here. And we showed her, we saw her strong areas, the ones that we had her doing, like a lot of the algebra 2 type stuff that she had done through Saxon was where she was the strongest. So I thought that was really interesting. That was a really big eye-opener on just how much the right curriculum matters for my students, like finding that right fit, because the ones that worked well for her, she obviously retained that information and was able to do well on the exam in those areas, and the ones that were a struggle for her, she really struggled in those areas. So I just thought that that was a really interesting thing to see. And if you do use a program like this and you have your student do that initial assessment, that might be a great eye-opener for you as well, to see where they are already very strong at and where they are struggling, and maybe kind of match that up to like the curriculum you're using, and is what you're using really, being retained by your students. So I just thought personally that that was really, really interesting. I also definitely agreed with her that having more regular usage of the program early on would probably be a good thing. So maybe having more, maybe set aside time, like not dictating like, hey, you need to do this amount of time a day, but maybe saying like, hey, our goal for this week, for like the first 4 weeks that we do prep, is 5 hours a week instead of 2, or even like 4 hours a week instead of 2. And then the next month we move up to 6 hours a week, or however we decide to do it. And I obviously don't want to like take away all of my kids' free time simply to do test prep. That is not my goal. But how, as their mom and their teacher, can I adjust our day to facilitate having that time? Most likely with my son, I will set a certain amount of hours a week that he needs to work on it. But also, like I did with my daughter, I'm going to try to work that into our homeschool day. So are there things that we can kind of back away on certain days of the week, or subjects we can maybe group to 3 days a week to give him 2 days a week to do some SAT prep during our kind of school time? And also, again, just kind of staying on top of those emails that I'm getting sent, letting me know how much time they've signed up for and how much time they've actually completed. So that's definitely something that we're going to do. The other thing is that like my second student is a different learner and has different strengths and weaknesses. Like math is actually a much bigger strength for him than reading and writing. So this is going to be probably a complete reversal of what he will work on versus what she worked on. So that'll be interesting just to see how that impacts his scores and his improvement. Somebody asked me as well if we used the 160-point guarantee. So if you go to the PrepScholar's site, they mention that if you don't score at least 160 points better, then the program is free. And then it has a little star that says see all the conditions. So we did not use that guarantee, because if you look under the terms and conditions, there are a couple of key things. First of all, you have to have a previous score. So you either have had to take the PSAT and you have a score from that, and then they give you instructions on how that gets adjusted to become your pre-SAT score, or you have to previously have taken the SAT. And then you're looking for score improvement. Second of all, you have to complete every single lesson and practice test that they recommend for you. So your student has to complete all of the things that they have put forth for that student to do. We did not have any pre-scores and she didn't do every single thing that was offered. So it wasn't even an option for us to do that 160-point guarantee. But again, we were very happy with how she performed on the exam. She was happy with how she performed on it. She did not seem overly nervous going into it on test day. And when she came home, she felt pretty good about things. She mentioned that there were, especially in the math area, there were things that came up that she didn't remember having seen before or having seen in any practice questions. That doesn't mean that they weren't covered at some point. It just means it was things that she did not recognize. But overall, she felt good and we were happy with things. Sorry, I had to pause a moment because my dog decided to bark at something in the driveway. Okay, so the big question, are we going to use PrepScholar again for my son? Well, based on how I've been talking, you've probably already figured out that yes, we are planning to use it again for my son. So he's going to be a junior this year. Our plan is once again to have him take the SAT in the spring. And if we're happy with that score, great, that will be what it is. And if he needs to, then he'd have the fall of his senior year to take it again if he needed it. So we are going to use that again. It is an expense. These programs are not cheap. I talked about that in the initial intro video, but I felt like it was a worthwhile investment. I feel like we've also learned how we can better utilize it to just make sure that we're, getting the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak, but it has been a good tool for us. So if you'd like to check out their website and find out more about their program, I will link their website down below. Again, there are lots of different options out there, and taking the SAT might not even be something that your homeschool student needs to do. For us, it was needed for a couple of different reasons, and we just wanted to make sure that that was something that we had completed and we could have those scores available if a school needed them or if a scholarship required them. If you have any other questions for us, or if you have questions you'd like me to run past my daughter, please don't hesitate to leave a comment down below and let me know those. She was more than gracious in answering these, and I'm sure she'd be able to answer any follow-up questions you guys have. Thanks so much for joining me for today's video, everybody. I will see you in the next one, and until then, happy homeschooling.